Hello viewers, 4DIYers here with another tutorial video for everyone. In this particular video here, I'll be doing a demonstration on how to replace the struts on a BMW E39 sedan. As always, if you're not a subscriber, then be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. For this particular video here, I'm using a 1997 BMW 540i sedan. Therefore, strut replacement for the touring version will be different. Faulty struts will cause excessive bouncing when driving or going over bumps, wheel vibrations or excessive wheel hop, excessive body roll during cornering, knocking or clunking sounds, uneven tire wear, and perhaps you may notice an oily residue around the shock or shock shaft. In this particular scenario, my strut mounting point was actually cracked instead. When replacing the struts, this should be done in pairs to equal each side. If one strut is worn, then most likely the other will be in a similar condition, so it's important to balance the handling of the vehicle. So both the passenger and driver's side rear struts will be replaced on this particular car. Start by removing the rear headrests. They simply pull straight up and out, then place them somewhere safe. Remove the pillar light, pop in a trim tool or screwdriver along the edge facing the front of the vehicle. Take your time not to damage the fabric or crack the plastic. Assist out with your fingers and completely remove. If using a screwdriver, you may decide to wrap the tip in electrical tape as added protection. There will be a plug on the back side which needs to be disconnected by pulling straight out. To remove the trim panel, fit your fingers through where the light was and pull at the two top corners. There will be two snap clips. After the clips have been disconnected, pull the trim straight up as it's tucked behind the rear deck trim. To remove the speaker covers, using a standard screwdriver again with electrical tape, insert it on the front side, then gently pry upwards. After the front has been unclipped, then feed your fingers around the edge and lift the rest up. Careful, there are small tabs that can easily break. Now remove the child restraint caps. These have a big Phillips plastic screw. Remove that first. Then pop the cap up and remove. Remove the seat starting with the bottom first. Grab firmly onto the one side, pull up, and you'll hear it unclip. Move over to the other side of the vehicle and do the same. Pull the seat forward so the seatbelt latches are removed from their slots and lift out and place somewhere safe. For the seat back, there will be two 12mm bolts, one on each side of the vehicle. Remove these using a 3/8 drive ratchet. The seat back then needs to be pulled upward to unclip the four mounting tabs on the back side. Once disconnected, tuck the seat belts behind the seat so it's easier to remove and lift out. Just to give you a peek at the clips behind the seat, there are two on each side of the vehicle, one midway on the back and the other towards the bottom. And the seat back, first is the bolt mounting location, again one at the bottom, and another clip at midway. Now to remove the seat belts, they use a 17mm. There will be 3 in total for each of the seat belts. Remove the plastic clips along the front side where the seat back used to be. Use a trim removal tool to pop the center pin out first, and then pull out the rest of the retaining clip. There will be 4 in total. Pop the seatbelt trim out so the seatbelt latches can be fed through the holes. You can reach in behind the shelf, push up the clips, and push out. Once removed, these have a slot at the bottom to pop out the seatbelt. Then tuck the seatbelts through the holes. Remove the 4 Phillips screws on the center headrest bracket. Now the rear window shelf can be fully removed. You will need to pull it up slightly so the insulation clears underneath the child restraint brackets and speakers, then pull forward. To remove the speakers, they will have 2 Phillips screws at the front which need to be removed. Disconnect the electrical connector, and then lift the speakers straight out. For the 3 child restraint brackets, these are held in with T40 Torx bolts. Once that bolt has been removed, the brackets can be taken out then. The seat belt reels will also need to be removed in order to move the sound insulation. These use a 16mm nut and lift out once the nut has been removed. There will be 3 in total. Jack up the rear of the vehicle safely. I will be replacing one side at a time. In case you haven't noticed, I'm using my OEM Tools impact wrench from Mobile Distributor Supply, model number 24481. This is a 20-volt heavy-duty half-inch impact wrench that is able to break fasteners free up to 300 foot-pounds or 406 Newton meters and tighten fasteners up to 260 foot-pounds or 352 Newton meters. This impact wrench includes a plastic carrying case and a charging station. The link to this product will be included in the description below. It's a little tight getting to the mounting point at the rear of the wheel carrier, so I removed the top portion of the sway bar link for added room. You'll need to take the weight off the sway bar by using another jack to lift up this particular wheel we are working on. The sway bar uses a 16mm nut, and a 16mm wrench can be used on the rear to prevent the stud from spinning. Pop out the link from the sway bar and then tuck it down. Now remove the large 21mm nut on the back side of the wheel carrier which holds the strut into place. I used a 1/2-inch Johnson bar with a socket from the rear to break it loose. Don't fully remove the bolt just yet though. Just to give you a peek at the top mounting fasteners of the strut, as you can see we are looking through the window here under the sound insulation. There will be a rubber cap at the center, and then around the outside there is 3 13mm nuts. Those 3 13mm nuts will need to be removed in order to remove the strut assembly. Remove those 3 13mm nuts, the strut assembly will stay into place. Unfortunately, the fender liner does need to be removed in order to remove the strut assembly. Remove the fasteners for the fender liner. There will be 2 plastic 10mm nuts on each side of the strut towards the bottom edge. There will be 3 8mm fasteners on the underside of the liner, one towards the inside on the bottom wraparound portion, and then 2 more at the front of the fender on the bottom side again. And then to the rear of the fender liner there should be plastic clips. Unfortunately mine were missing. Considering I'm working on the passenger side, the fuel filler neck will need to be removed and swung out of the way. To remove this, there will be 2 10mm nuts, one behind the strut area, and then the other is above close to the opening. Next, remove the gear clamp, just one is needed. Pull out the hose. Now push the plastic hose off to the side. And finally, the strut can be removed. I installed a bottle jack between the strut and the unibody frame component. There is some upward tension on the suspension for the preloaded bushings, so the jack will help hold everything into place and prevent it from springing back once disconnected. The strut bottom sits in a pocket, so it needs to be pushed out. Use a dead below hammer or a rubber mallet for assistance if need be. Allow the strut to drop down, tip out the top, and fully remove. And as you can see here is the issue I'm facing. I have heard of this happening to other E39 models, although I'm not sure if this is a common issue or if it's only happened to a handful of cars. If you do discover your strut mounting point does have a crack, do not drive the vehicle. It's unsafe, and if it lets go, it can cause you to lose control and create an accident. Now for breaking down the strut assembly, we'll need a spring compressor for this. You can either use your own, rent the tools from a local auto parts store, or have a mechanic do the replacement for you. I will show the full replacement here. If you do purchase a spring compressor, don't cheapen out. Make sure it's a good quality one, as they can jeopardize your safety. Make sure the threaded rods are well oiled. Normally I like to use a heavyweight gear oil on these. Assemble the spring compressor. So it's the washers first on a threaded rod, then the non-threaded jaws, and finally the threaded jaws. Install the jaws onto the coil. Normally I like to have at least 2 inches of threaded rod exposed on the outside, just as a safety. Install the other set of jaws, and snug everything down. Just to give you a peek, I have clipped down the safety pins so the jaws can't pop off. They're properly seated around each of the coils of the spring, and are across from each other so the spring is evenly compressed. Compress as much of the spring as possible so it puts the least amount of tension on the coil spring compressor. The more coils you are compressing, the less movement is required for each of the coils. Compress the coil spring, going between each of the jaws so everything is evenly drawn in. You're looking at about 1/4 inch of play once the coil spring is loose in the assembly. You'll see a space on the rubber pads. In order to break the assembly down, there is a 16mm retaining nut at the top, which is connected to the shock shaft. Remove this. I'm using an impact wrench along with pliers to hold the shock shaft from spinning. If you are keeping the shock, do not use pliers, as this will damage the surface and eventually create a seal failure, shortening the life of the shock. You can also use wrenches for the nut and to hold the shaft into place. Once the nut is loose, you'll see that the metal cap on the top is loose as well. If it isn't, then compress the spring more. Remove all the parts. The spring compressor will need to be removed in order to fully remove the bump stop. Pair up the old and new shocks, ensure they are the same, and start assembly. I used a paint marker to make reference marks with the mounting point hole so everything is lined up and it makes for easier installation. You can make some minor movements when installed back on the vehicle, but anything more may be too hard. Replace any faulty or worn parts as required. Compress the spring and install the nut. Continue to compress the spring and tighten everything down as required. The torque specification for the nut is 20 foot-pounds or 27 Newton meters. Slowly release the spring compressor and ensure all the components are in the correct position and orientation. Ensure the mounting point on the wheel carrier is clean, then install the strut assembly back onto the vehicle. I found it easier to pull the strut assembly up and feed it into the shock tower mounting point first. Just strut on a couple nuts by hand to hold it into place. Then align and install the wheel carrier bolt once everything is pushed into place. I also used medium grade thread locker on all the fasteners when installing it back onto the vehicle. Torque specifications for the wheel stud carrier bolt is 94 foot-pounds or 127 Newton meters. For the driver's side, it's the exact same procedure. The only real difference is the expansion tank for the fuel tank that needs to be swung out of its location. New videos are uploaded every week to my channel, so subscribe to this YouTube channel by clicking on the button below the video. This concludes the rest of my video. Be sure to give me a thumbs up, and if you have any comments, please feel free to post them. Thank you for watching.